Welcome back to another episode of Raw Podcast, the podcast that I host as Yenna Vitalovite, where I'm just speaking from a stream of consciousness. That's a real thing. Stream of consciousness. And by the way, I'm still feeling a bit crook. And if you're watching the video of me, then you'll see it in my face, in my voice, in my hair. Haven't really showered recently. So I just thought I'd come onto this podcast today and talk about, again, as a stream of consciousness, solving certain problems in dating, in relationships, and manifestation, believe it or not. You know, it's so interesting when I first started getting into dating and relationship advice as a consumer. It's interesting how manifestation didn't really come to mind much for me many years ago, like a decade ago. I read The Secret by Rhonda Byrne at one point, and I think I read that book right after I had broken up with my first long distance relationship, which only lasted maybe 3 months. But I guess it didn't really work out for me. My second long distance relationship was pretty good. I thought it was. And that worked out. But my main guy that I went to listen to was Bobby Rio most of the time. I bought other pieces of dating advice long in the past, but I think by memory and by heart, Bobby Rio was the guy I went to the most. And a lot of his advice was kind of psychological, sort of. And I bought his program called The Scrambler. And, you know, to be honest, I might have to look at it again, but I don't think The Scrambler is what worked for me in successfully landing my second long-distance relationship. Because the premise of The Scrambler is that you basically have to get your romantic interest to change their perception of you. And if you think about it, psychologically, this is the most important part of trying to reattract your ex, trying to change someone's mind, whatever. I don't know how he figured it out in his own terminology, but in my experience, after having a separation with my long-distance relationship, that's all done and dusted now. That's long ago now, but it's just like when I went through the journey of trying to figure out how the hell do you rectify the downfall of a relationship, how the hell do you rectify and resolve the longing and the pain? You know, no one really likes it when the relationship is destroyed. I think most people feel really terrible about that. But I think that really is just kind of the solution. That your romantic interest has to change their perception of you. And when it comes to manifestation, this is actually kind of the core mechanic behind a manifestation. You can look at nervous system regulation, the reticular activating system, the subconscious mind, all these things. But at the end of the day, the one skill that you kind of have a lot of power over is just changing perception. Now, how do you change your romantic interest perception? Well, what most people, I actually say most people, do not talk about is artificial versus natural. Now, some people will say you've got to be chill, relax, nonchalant versus clingy, chasing. They use all these buzzwords. But the correct terminology at the fundamental first principle level is artificial versus natural. You'll see artificial and versus natural is part of an antithetical approach. It is looking at the contrasting opposites. And I think with Bobby Rio, right, I think even though he might try to lean his audience towards a natural perspective, I think a lot of the time when you're consuming the advice, unless I'm just autistic as fuck, a lot of it just kind of felt very artificial to induce and to practice. A lot of the dating advice just really feels so artificial. And this is a real problem because if you want the natural relationship, if you want all this natural stuff, it requires the natural approach. It requires the natural state of consciousness, and much less the artificial. Because the artificial backfires, whereas the natural draws in more naturally. As you can imagine how much more soothing that sounds. Natural versus artificial. But how do you naturally get your romantic interest, partner, ex, etc., to change the perception of you? Well, what's interesting, as part of the law of the antithesis, as what I like to call it, if you read, you have to read the law of the book called the Kabbalion to understand this. And if you want, read the Four Agreements as well. And if you really want, read Neville Goddard. I personally really like his book called Prayer, the Art of Believing. I've read it like 20 times, 30 times. I love that book. If you don't know much about manifestation, The Secret is a great introduction. But how do you get your romantic interest to change the perception of you? Well, again, with the law of the antithesis, there are things within your control and there are things outside of your control. And if you read the book called The 48 Laws of Power, there's a chapter in it called Disdain the Things You Cannot Have. And I think this is kind of one of the most underappreciated chapters of the book, because it kind of basically tells you to control your controllables and stop giving a fuck about the things you can't control, in a sense. And even more recently, me, towards my own romantic interest, it's like IDGAF. I don't give a fuck anymore about things outside of my control. Like, I don't care if she reacts this way. I don't care if she reacts this way. If I'm trying to induce a particular state, I might aim for that. But I don't care if, like, she throws away a gift that I give her. I don't care if she would yell. I just don't care, you know. I'm not afraid. And this is the number one sign that you're manifesting much more successfully, where not caring becomes more second nature. And how you change their perception is you actually have to change your perception of them. Neville Goddard says everyone is you pushed out. To me, that's a very confusing terminology that he uses. He has a reason for why he says that, but it doesn't. It's really challenging for me to wrap my head around it. But on the top of my head, everyone, the 3D world, your reality, it is what you believe that manifests. Who you are is what manifests. You are the sum total of your beliefs, and all these beliefs have systems, and they all interconnect. But it is the beliefs, and the beliefs are narratives, stories, ideas, thoughts even. So the intangible is responsible for the tangible. So with your romantic interest, she is a manifestation, or he is, if you're a lass, of your underlying subconscious beliefs. And so to change them, all you have to do, in a sense, is change your subconscious underlying beliefs. And what are these subconscious underlying beliefs? Subconscious, in a sense, actually means sleeping. The sleeping mind, the sleeping conscious. So it's like consciousness. This consciousness comes in two parts: the conscious mind and the subconscious. The awake and the sleeping, both active at the same time, but the sleeping mind is greater than the waking mind. Second nature mind. And these, it's kind of like consciousness is split into two: conscious, awake, and sleeping, subconscious. And subconscious runs 90+% of our life, apparently. But that's all you kind of have to do, and that's really the main goal, is that you have to change your perception of your romantic interest. You have to stop seeing them as a threat. You have to stop seeing them as a villain. You have to stop immersing yourself and identifying with your suffering, and stop looking at them as if they are the source of your suffering, when in fact nobody can make you angry except yourself. Yeah, me the other day, I kind of blew up at my brother the other day because there was some contention between us. And I'm going to write this in my book, where when I blew up at my brother, I wasn't personally attacking him. I made that very clear. I just basically told him to F off. I did apologize a little bit later, but the contention, it's like I'm attacking different aspects of myself that I don't like. Like I'm attacking an old version of me that I see within my brother. The overly cocky, imposing version of me. And that's how I used to be like in a little bit with my, in my past relationship stuff. It might be a natural tendency to be imposing, to be extremely cocky and not really care. And the whole caring thing, not giving a fuck, idgaff, I never see anyone talk about this, but what really matters is where you give a fuck. It's about where you care. So I like to think of it like this. If you don't give a fuck, like let's say your romantic interest is cheating, or they don't text back to you, or you want them back, but you want them but you don't need them, so you just don't care. You don't care about the outcome. Cool, bananas. It's all about where you don't care. Because in the same sense, this whole not caring about your romantic interest returning to you, does this also mean you don't care about having your car clean? And your car is literally full of junk. I've met people who have literally had junk full to the ceiling of the car. And I feel so much regret really meeting and helping these people out in a sense. Because I'm just throwing pearls away at swine. So, what was I on about? I got distracted by that van outside. Thought it might have been an Amazon delivery or something. Maybe it is. Don't know. You'd see if people looked at your dirty car, especially your romantic interest if she hops in, and they can see you don't really care about yourself. You don't care about the expressions of your identity, because that's what your car is, and that's what your belongings and your nest is. It's an expression of your identity. So you don't care about your own identity. So it's all about where you care. Where from, where to. It's like God, Ultra. He hates evil. So where do you? I think there are certain scriptures in the Bible where he directs his attention, because God is responsible for darkness and light. Both cannot exist without the other in a sense. But he chooses light and he prefers light. Darkness has its place. And it's all about where. Where do you care? Where do you place your attention? From where are you? Where are you in your heart? From what place are you looking at the world is what really matters. It's the lens in which you see the world. And so that's all you really have to do to change a lot of this stuff. Now, this whole lens thing, it's kind of like the glass, the rose glass appearance stuff. So what makes this lens much more effective is it all has to be in your heart. And if it's all in your heart, everything is a lot more second nature. Everything's a lot more natural. And that's what manifestation is. I think it's Proverbs 27:19. I think that's the scripture. As a man's face is reflected in the mirror, so is a man's life a reflection of his own heart. When I read that scripture for the first time, it all came crashing down for me, because that is manifestation 101 in a single nutshell. Like, that is what manifestation is. Your life is a reflection of your heart. So what is in your heart is what manifests. So if you want to change your lens, etc., you could artificially create a weird ass lens, but is it for real? Is it in your heart? And that's what matters. So that's how you kind of change your romantic interest, by actually not changing changing them. There's a lot of inverse nature when it comes to manifestation. There's so much inverse nature. You actually do more by doing less. Very interesting stuff. It's very psychological. Now, I'm going to change subject a little bit now before I forget. So I'm moving on to something else. I realized the other day that for someone on YouTube to buy a coach's products or services, such as myself, all it takes is watching a couple of videos. Even you right now, you might be listening to this. Oh, that's cool. Because if you didn't know, becoming a coach is literally the way to become rich these days, other than maybe OnlyFans. And when I discovered this, I went on this enormous journey to figure this shit out. But the problem is everyone else is just using weird ass terminology it's not compatible. So I've got to sit down and think really hard and figure it out for myself. But I figured out the other day, no one told me this, I figured this out. I was watching this other coach, this woman, this other manifestation coach. She was talking about very specific problems, I guess, that kind of sparked my interest. And it only took me, maybe 10 videos at most before I made the decision to buy her $500 course. I think the reason I decided to buy it was because she was the only manifestation coach I listened to who spoke about this thing called resistance and safety. And I haven't heard resistance in a while, except a program that I was a part of, whom I shall not mention who that was written by. And yeah, that resistance, I thought that was very interesting. Because if you want your partner to feel safe with you, one of the biggest challenges that I've ever had to overcome was I always had this idea that I had to provide safety for my romantic interest. I wasn't safe. Lack of safety is the number one problem why relationships are struggling. There's one dude on YouTube who you'll see who always talks about safety, emotional safety. But I think that guy is just a bit of a narcissist from experience. And which is so ironic because his whole program suffers from victim mindsets, the very things he preaches against. But what I didn't know, not until I learned about Neville Goddard and actually just looking at this woman's perspective, is that the safety has to be within yourself first and two. Because if you see yourself as a threat to your romantic interest and you're like trying to not be a threat, you're just being more of a nuisance. You're just being more of a threat to yourself and you're just shooting yourself in your foot without realizing it. And you're following the letter to the T, the letter that killeth. Trying to artificially create safety in a sense. This is how it's artificial because you're trying to make this person as comfortable as possible, but this isn't what induces romance. This isn't what induces sexual erotic arousal. Because how can they feel safe with you if you don't feel safe with yourself? You see yourself as a threat. And not only that, you might even see your romantic interest as someone unsafe to be with because of some past experience with them. And it builds this resistance within you, this sort of gut feeling of being a bit scared, a bit hyper aware. And so you just have to start seeing them as a grasshopper. They're not really a threat. They're actually safe. And you're safe. And you just, once you realize that, you're like, oh, that's it. There's not really much to do after that. You just stay the course and Minecraft your way from there. There really isn't much more to do than that. And you just sort of saturate yourself naturally in this state. That's what a state is. A state of consciousness is like a building. This is what I mean when I say structural integrity. We're referring to the integrity of the structure. The structure is the state, the sum total of your beliefs and who you are. And the integrity is important because does the structure hold under pressure? Does it hold under earthquakes and turbulence and tribulation? Because it should. Because if it does, then you know this is the real deal. And this is why tests are actually such a good thing. And if you can reinterpret tests, see things differently, assign a completely different meaning to tribulation and suffering, then you're on the right path. Now, the third thing I want to kind of touch up on, or actually, did I finish up on the second point about this whole course that I bought? Go. Okay, so yeah, I mean, me buying that course, it just gave me a lot of reassurance. Not even the fact that I even had access to the course before I bought it. I mean, like literally realizing, let's say you want to be a coach too. And even just myself, it's just like, you don't need to scramble to make cash. All it takes is a couple of YouTube videos for someone to listen to, 20-minute videos, and they're sold. 10 videos, they're sold. They already made a decision to buy. It's not up to me to artificially try to get this person to buy. It just naturally kind of arises within the consumer. And when I think about this for relationship standards, this is extremely fascinating because this is almost like how many decisions are made in general. Because a purchase is not just a purchase, it's an agreement. And so let's say your romantic interest, for example. I wasn't thinking about it too much, but I just like, wow, the implications would be huge. But let's think about this for a moment. For someone to make a decision, especially, like to fork out something, like sacrifice a bit of cash, sacrifice a bit of time, sacrifice a bit of, anything. There's a bit of calculation in their minds. And a decision's been made. Your romantic interest, all they need to do is be away from you, think about you. And over time, the more they think about you, maybe it could be 10 times, that is sufficient to create a spark within them that compels them to be with you, love you, etc. Because the pain, we want the pain of being away from you much greater than the pain of being with you. Because this is how all relationships end. Because the pain of being with you becomes greater than the pain of being away from you. And I just find that really fascinating. All right, moving on to the third thing I wanted to get off my chest a little bit is when I first started being a relationship coach, mentor, instructor. I really prefer instructing. There was this guy who rang me up. I was hosting myself for free at the time. He was an actor, a stage actor. And there was this woman at the workplace apparently he was very interested in. But another guy beat him to it. And I honestly felt like an imposter at the time when I was talking to this guy. But now that after I've read Neville Goddard over and over again, and I see this completely different universe, I would basically kind of say, like, it sounds crazy and impractical, but you have to kind of remove your attention away from that problem of the other guy being interested in the girl and she's not choosing you, etc. You have to remove your attention away from it. And you have to start paying attention to your inner conversation. You have to start paying attention to where your mind is dwelling at. Where are you in your heart? Because it is imagination that creates reality. Thoughts create things. No building was ever constructed that first preceded thought. So if you're experiencing something like that, you created that. You contributed to that because that's within your heart, in a sense. So something within you created this, And it could be conflict, inner conflict. You might have two things going on at the same time, but which is more dominant? So we have to kind of go within and mentally observe ourselves and feel what we're feeling and see what's going on in there. Primarily, we're looking for subconscious, sleeping, underlying beliefs, the programming. And in your imagination, the realm of heaven, from personal experience, the guy doesn't exist. The other guy doesn't exist. Because if it exists in the mind, it exists out here in the real world. So remove your attention away from it, because what you focus on expands. Where attention goes, energy flows. That's how manifestation works. And in your heart, you just simply see yourself successfully being with this woman, but you do not try to artificially create this thing happening. You just naturally allow things to happen around you. And in your inner world, you're just being a bit like a playful child. You're not taking it too seriously, and you're not trying to kind of sit there every day doing sats or other things, trying to make something happen. It just naturally happens in its own time, and you fall asleep to the fact. This is something that I describe as, most people say, let go or surrender or whatever. The most pinpoint, accurate description of when you acquire a manifestation is when you fall asleep to it, where you don't think about it. And that's fascinating. You fall asleep to it. So you be like a playful child in your inner world. And you see yourself with your romantic interest, holding hands. They're talking to you. They're telling you how they really enjoy your physical appearance. They like your nose or something. You feel your hand on their back, and you feel the very soft hoodie, and you feel the skin, and you squeeze it a little bit, and you just, in your imagination, you're just kind of moving around like this. You're sort of swimming in this place. Keep doing that, as opposed to swimming in a place of suffering, and of worse, identifying with the suffering as well. So don't dwell on your suffering. Don't try to remove it. Don't identify your romantic interest as a villain or some other threat. You must choose to be safe within yourself first. You must, if you want your romantic interest to feel safe with you, which is one of the root causes of not being together, you have to first feel safe within yourself. And how do you feel safe? You just feel relaxed. You don't give a fuck. You eat gaff. You're not concerned about things like, you disdain the things that are outside of control. Control your controllables. Focus what is in your locus of control. Because if you focus on what is in your locus of control, you naturally affect the things that are outside of your control. And this is actually one ways I do know how to control the things outside of your control. And it's a natural thing. It's a byproduct. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap it up for this episode. I reckon this is one of my most important episodes that I've ever made in all of my 2 years of relationship coaching and instructing so far. And I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're a dude, you might find this particularly useful. And, when it comes to success stories and shit like that, I'm not really all about the parking and looking at some other purple shirt, and manifesting car spots and a cup of coffee and relationships where it's like, duh, of course they'd be around. I like to look at the very challenging things. And one final note before I go is just keep in mind that manifestation is not literal. It's expressive. The literal fact comes about as a result of the expression. This is Jonathan Talawat signing out.